know you're talking about a revolution. It sounds like a whisper.
Hello, welcome to another show of New Hampshire Citizens for Progress. Well, our topic today is going to be redistricting. Which one of these things doesn't belong? Census, redistricting, or gerrymandering? Well, if you just guessed gerrymandering, you're correct. It's really, we voters pick the legislators. There's something wrong with legislators picking the voters. So we got Brian Beihl from Open Democracy Action here to help us work on this subject, this topic here.
So Open Democracy is a nonpartisan nonprofit that's based out of Concord, and we were founded by Granny D. Haddock, Doris Granny D. Haddock, who was born in Laconia and lived in Dublin for a lot of her life, New Hampshire for a lot of her life. And she founded our organization, and you might remember Granny D. She walked across the United States when she was 90 years old, and she lived to be 100, and she died just 10 years ago in 2010. If you want to learn more, a quick way to do that, there's a great New York Times obituary on her that kind of describes how important she was in voting rights and campaign finance reform.
So in issues of democracy, what's so important about us presenting this information now? What's going on?
Well, redistricting is kind of a wonky thing, but really, really important thing for a lot of how our electoral system works and the decisions that we make as a state. So the census happens every 10 years. This is the federal U.S. Census. And that informs a lot of things. It informs about how much money go to your school or a portion to your school based on population. And, there's been a lot of shifts in New Hampshire over the time that I've lived here, the 35 years I've lived here, where a population has shifted more from the North Country because a lot of the mills have closed, right? So they have to reapportion the voting districts as well. So that means we're supposed to, for the New Hampshire State Legislature, specifically the New Hampshire House, that we're supposed to have a state rep for every 3,300 and change people in New Hampshire, okay? So redistricting every 10 years has to move those districts around to get those 3,300 people in the House district. But we also have to do state Senate districts, the congressional districts, and the county districts. And even in the cities, we have to do the wards because people will move around in the wards. We have to redraw these maps.
So in the process of doing that, that's going to be the census just finished up. So that means that very near future, this is what's going to be happening. Am I correct?
And exactly. So the census data is due in sometime in January. And then after that point, the New Hampshire Legislature will convene a committee, a working committee, that's going to start to draw these new maps. And what when they draw these maps, ideally, we want those maps to be fairly drawn. And by that we mean we want them to be towns or areas of town that have areas of community interest. Let's say Manchester, for instance, has its Greek community in Manchester, or in some cases you want cities or urban areas to be together, but you don't want to pair a voting district with a city and a very rural area, because the people in those areas have different interests, don't they? So you ideally want them have some shared interests. Maybe it's a school district, maybe it's a watershed, maybe it's a tax structure. So we want those to be together. But where redistricting goes bad, that's called gerrymandering.
So before we go into what's bad, this is going to be for the next 10 years, right? We don't get to redo this till they do the next census is the issue, right?
That's right. The map drawing process is going to take over a year to complete. The last time we did this in 2010, it went all the way to 2012. So it took almost 2 years to do that 10-year, every 10-year redistricting. So it's really important that we make sure that we do it right, because we have to live with it for the next 10 years.
So this isn't reinventing the wheel. I mean, places across countries, even in the U.S., other states and stuff, have set this up so that it works good.
So the Supreme Court of the United States just very recently, in August of 2019, came down with a ruling and said it's the state's responsibility to do this redistricting. Okay, so states all around the country are doing that in conjunction with the census. Every state does it a little bit differently. In New Hampshire, our current constitution says the legislature is responsible for it. In some states, they use an independent redistricting commission that is independent of the politics, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that get wrapped up in these voting districts. So sometimes they're independent, sometimes it's a group that makes a recommendation to the legislature and says, here are the maps we think you ought to have, and the legislature will take those under consideration and either approve them or amend them, or, and eventually approve them.
So we could call this best practices? Would that be a way to describe it?
Yeah, exactly. There are best practices to do this. That's right.
When I was looking at one of the best practices that really jumped out at me was transparency. We want the public, anybody that's curious, to be able to see how this is being done and what's being done about it. Are there others?
Well, exactly. It should be transparent to the voters because it's their vote that this is going to affect. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And in redistricting can be done for good and for making sure that the districts are fair and equitable for the voters and that everybody's vote counts. But they can also be done for bad. And like I said a minute ago, that's gerrymandering. Can I show you a map of what gerrymandering looks like? So I just threw up on the screen a graphic that I made recently that shows New Hampshire, and this is the executive council districts in New Hampshire. The executive council, for people who don't know, is a group of 5 legislators that advise the governor here. And there in 2010 to 2012, when the last redistricting was done, there was something very nefarious that was done to this district. I'd like you to look at this one in bright blue, and that goes all the way from Hinsdale, which is a very rural town, right on the Massachusetts and Vermont border. And it goes all the way over to Rochester, which has very little in common with the rural aspects of the whole, basically the western side of the state. So I bet you're going to ask me, Rick, why was it done this way?
Yeah, why? I mean, that's from like Portsmouth area. That's nothing like the Berkshires, you know?
Yeah, exactly right. So this encompasses a number of towns. It includes Portsmouth, it includes Concord, and it includes Keene. And I bet you if you looked up the voting histories of those towns, shockingly, they'd be all Democratic leaning. So what happened here was the people who made the maps decided that if we move all of those towns that are leaning blue into one district, that would leave the other districts more red. And so if you do the math and you know that the section in red is a red area, leans conservative. The section in the dark blue leans conservative, and the whole upper 2/3 of New Hampshire is all in one district. That's kind of greenish gray color there. Well, when you do the math, that means 3 conservative leaning districts and 2 Democratic leaning districts. So what they're trying to do is bake in control of the executive council by manipulating these voting districts. It's cheating is what it is.
So this is something both parties do, am I correct? Whoever happens to draw the map at the time, be they Democrats, be they Republicans, is they try to draw the maps which best benefits them, not necessarily us, the people.
So in this graphic, the graphic that's at the top there for Maryland is an example of where Democrats put it to the Republicans. It is more often a Republican-controlled legislators that do this, but it happens in Maryland is a good example. It also happens in the cities, just in the cities when they're working on the wards. So you see this in Chicago is notorious for this, and this hacking and cracking. And I think you've got a video that kind of explains that. But the packing and cracking, where you're packing people into one district or cutting a district in half to put Democrats in one side, Republicans in another. This also happens for racial basis. So they'll take communities that they know are heavily Hispanic or African American, and they will put them into their own district to make sure that the other districts remain one way or the other. So there's a lot of hanky-panky that goes on with this, the creation of these voting districts. And like you said earlier, Richard, this is every 10 years. So once this gets baked in, it's really hard to fix it.
So the Supreme Court's made a few decisions on this recently, and from what I researched, it's against the law to pack the districts according to race. But it's not against the law for them to do it according to party.
For political reasons, exactly. And the Supreme Court in that August 2019 decision basically was a no decision. They basically said, we don't want to rule on this. We are giving it to the states to figure it out. Kick the can down the road.
Okay, well, let's run that video now, and we'll let the viewers at home watch this video on packing and cracking.
Suppose we have a very tiny state of 50 people. 30 of them belong to the blue party, and 20 belong to the red party. And just our luck, they all live in a nice even grid with blues on one side of the state and reds on the other. Now, let's say we need to divide the state into 5 districts. Each district will send one representative to the House to represent the people. Fortunately, because our citizens live in a neatly ordered grid, it's easy to draw 5 lengthy districts, 2 for the reds and 3 for the blues. Voila! Perfectly proportional representation, just as the founders intended. Now, let's say instead that the blue party controls the state government, and they get to decide how the lines are drawn. Rather than draw districts horizontally, they draw them vertically, so that in each district there are 6 blues and 4 reds. With a comfortable blue majority in the state, each district elects a blue candidate to the House. The blues win 5 seats, and the reds don't get a single one. Oh well. Finally, what if the red party controls the state government? The reds know they're at a numerical disadvantage. But with some creative boundary drawing, they can slice the blue population up such that they only get a majority in 2 districts. So despite making up 40% of the population, the Reds win 60% of the seats. Not bad. This process of redrawing district lines to give an advantage to one party over another is called gerrymandering, and it's nothing new. The term gerrymander is named after early 19th century Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry, who redrew the map of the Senate's districts in 1810 in order to weaken the opposing Federalist Party. Our example is, of course, a huge simplification. In the real world, people don't live in neatly ordered grids sorted by political party. But for politicians looking to give themselves an advantage at redistricting time, the process is exactly the same, and the consequences are very real.
Brian, you want to explain a little bit more on this?
So we are in New Hampshire trying to prevent, we already have gerrymandering. We showed you that one that looks like a dragon in the second executive council. But I will tell you that our Senate districts, we have some Senate districts that are also gerrymandered. And I'm going to throw one of those up on the screen for you to see. So these are our New Hampshire Senate districts, and you can see down in the lower right-hand corner that really dark red area. That is a gerrymandered area there, trying to lock in Republican votes. We also have some things going on down in the very southern part along the Massachusetts border, where there were some decisions made there. Now, it is a difficult thing to be able to make the numbers come out right. But it can also be done in a fairer way than we have now. The 2010 to 2012 redistricting flipped about 20 seats in the New Hampshire House in 2016 as a result of what they did in 2010 to 2012. They could get worse, and that's what we're really worried about in the next couple of months, because with all the power being in Republican hands as of the November 3rd election, we're afraid that that power is going to go to if it gets into the wrong hands, if redistricting falls into the wrong hands, that the gerrymandering could get a lot worse. And what happens is your vote, if you're packed into a Democratic district, your vote doesn't matter a whole lot because the outcome is predetermined. You want your vote to be representative of the makeup of the district, to be representative of the people who live in that geographic area, not just made up to pack a bunch of Democrats or a bunch of Republicans into.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to pick my legislator. I don't want my legislator picking the voters, and the votes really don't matter because of the way they drew these voting districts. You did have a way for people that are concerned about this, because that's the transparency part. And if we, the people, are watching what's going on and we can know and see what's going on, you have a place for them to sign up to help with this, Brian?
I do. We have a new initiative that is part of our open democracy regional democracy teams. And anybody can get involved in this. Our open democracy page, we have, if you go in and you go under take action and you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see our redistricting warrant article initiative. Now, a warrant article is something that we can do in town meetings for our smaller towns, but then we also have a resolution that is going to be used in the cities. And what both of these are asking for is fairness in the process, so that everybody's vote counts. But also, you mentioned transparency, Richard. We want this to be done in the light of day, not in a back room with software that nobody knows anything about, which is what happened in 2010 and 2012. And in fact, they had public hearings, and I use air quotes on public hearings, where in 2012, when they unveiled these, they didn't have anything to show at the public meetings, at the public hearings. People showed up to look at the maps, and there were no maps.
So you have one here designed for the city as well. And can you scroll down on that page and show the people where they put their information in so they can give us a hand in making sure this happens fairly and transparently?
Name, address, and that will trigger a contact from us, and we can give you more details. And this page that you're on is also linked to several other pages that explain this whole process, what's involved in doing a warrant article initiative. It sounds really intimidating, but it's not. Basically, you have to gather a handful of signatures, which we're set up to do remotely, to be able to download the forms and send them back. And we have sample resolutions that have been created, so you don't have to write anything. We actually have a sample resolution that you can use if you're in the city. And we have sample warrant articles. So it's pretty kind of turnkey activism where we're helping you out. You still have to do a little legwork, but this is all versions of this have already passed in 28 towns, and we're hoping to hit 100 towns by the end of this process. Hopefully by midsummer, next summer, we'll have 100 towns. What we hope to do is to be able to say to the legislators, look, 100 towns in New Hampshire have said they want fair and transparent voting districts and a fair and transparent process. So you need to listen to them. The voters are telling you what they want.
So the big concern is back in, was it 2010 or 2012, that people tried to have input into this and they were completely ignored and not listened to?
Well, exactly, Richard. There were people who made citizens who proposed maps to the legislature, and those maps were never even considered as part of the process. And we should be able to, as voters and citizens of New Hampshire, be able to have input on what those maps look like. Remember, I know this may come as a shock to you, but the legislators work for us.
So we have the Republicans, we have the Democrats, and this happens at the city level as well. So like the city of Manchester will be drawing their own districts for school board, these internal things.
Yeah, exactly. And those, a lot of the state representative districts are based on what the cities draw for their wards. So they will take that into consideration. So the cities are going to draw theirs, and we want the city process to be above board and transparent. Because that certainly, as I said, like in cities like Chicago, it can be really bad. We hope that we get a better process here in New Hampshire and in Nashua, Manchester, Concord, even Berlin. We need to make these fair for everybody.
So you had a lot of volunteers. We just had the election recently, and one of the projects you worked on, Democracy Protectors, I believe, was to have poll workers and observers and nonpartisan people to make sure that things worked out at the polls. So this isn't something new that you guys have been doing.
Open Democracy works on a lot of issues to guarantee that we maintain our right to vote. And, New Hampshire, you don't think of New Hampshire as being a place where voter suppression takes place. But this is all, whether it's redistricting or money in politics or voting rights, they're all having to do with making sure that our voice matters. And we, when it came to the November election, we fielded 90 volunteers, and we covered about 60% of the polling places in New Hampshire to make sure that the process was fair and that people's their votes were cast without any kind of interference. And believe it or not, here in New Hampshire, you wouldn't think that there would be voter intimidation, but there was voter intimidation going on in Manchester, particularly in Nashua. We had some issues in Nashua with people trying to raise heck outside the polling places, fill parking lots so that voters couldn't get close to the polls. That kind of thing happens.
So once people sign up that they want to help with redistricting, be part of the proposing a town warrant article or a city resolution, you also have meetings. We're not doing them in person at this point, and they take place, are they weekly?
So we have our regional democracy teams, and we have the Monadnock region. We have Southern New Hampshire, which includes Manchester and Nashua. We have our central team, which includes Concord up to Laconia. We have our Seacoast team, an Upper Valley team, and a North Country team. And these are citizens just like you and me, who have gotten tired of waiting for things to happen, and they are working in their communities with their local town officials, election officials, with their state representatives and senators, and they work also on, communicating to the general public to teach them about redistricting and gerrymandering, for instance, right? So that people have a better understanding of how their system works, and more importantly, how to get active and fix some of these things. Because unless your state representatives and your elected officials hear that you're unhappy with the way things are going and you'd like to see a better system, unless we speak up, nothing's ever going to change. So our democracy teams, their job is to take action. And if you want to see your democracy work for you, I'd really recommend you get involved in these regional democracy teams. You do a search on Google for regional democracy teams and open democracy action. You will come up with a page where you can sign up to be a part of this.
And due to the pandemic, like everybody else, we're doing these meetings by Zoom or Google or Meetup or some form of remote audio video communication.
Right. We have meetings on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays. These are each for different teams and different regions. And then we have anybody who wants to come on a Sunday night at 7. We have an any team or guest meeting where we talk about some of the issues and the things that we're working on. And these are folks from different towns throughout these regions, and so they work in a very local basis. And we might be putting in letters to the editor. We might be talking to our local town clerk or moderator. There's all kinds of different things we do. It's very interesting work.
Well, I strongly recommend to those of you watching out here that would like to get involved in this to look up Open Democracy Action. I'll put the links in the YouTube, because once I finish this show, I do upload it on YouTube, and you can find it under New Hampshire Citizens for Progress or Rick Maynard. Both of them will bring you to the shows that I've produced. And this usually takes me 4 or 5 days to get the show up there. So I want to thank you, Brian, for being with us and explaining this process to us. And I want to thank all you at home for spending your time and watching this show. Take care, be healthy, be safe, and thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.